Good morning. It's Scott Cullen, editor-in-chief of the Cannata Report. It is so good to be with you this morning for another episode of Fridays with Frank. Unfortunately, Frank can't be with us this morning. He is traveling. He's in Mexico this week at the Impact Networking company meeting. And normally when Frank's away, we'll do our recording the following week when he returns. But I'll be traveling next week. I'll be at the Executive Connection Summit. So what I'm going to do is stand in for Frank this morning, and we're going to be talking about our annual watch list issue, which is our December, January issue. And I want to talk about 5 of the companies we're going to be watching. And if you go online, you'll be able to see the complete issue and all of the companies we're going to be watching, as well as the trends and the people and some of the products we're going to be watching in 2025. But let's focus on the companies today. Well, the first company we're going to be watching, and actually it's 2 companies. It's Xerox, and the reason we're going to be watching them is because of their December 23rd announcement that they would be acquiring Lexmark. And when we published our issue back in mid-December, of course, this was not news at that time. So that was not a reason we were going to be watching either one of those companies, even though both were on our list. But this is a great reason to watch them. And let's focus on Xerox here. And it's, it was the biggest story of the year. And they really stuck it in there right at the end. And it's a good move for Lexmark because it helps them shed a lot of the baggage associated with Nine Star Corporation. Not that it, I think, really was affecting their dealers or even dealer customers, but it was something that definitely was not a positive when it came to the company overall. Xerox, they're picking up a formidable A4 line, and that's going to help them tremendously there. The other thing I think that's going to be interesting to watch is what's going to happen with the Lexmark personnel, especially those who are tied very closely to the independent dealer channel. Now, from what we understand and from conversations with Lexmark dealers, they do like the folks over at Lexmark, at least the ones who are still there and who they interact with daily. And I'm speaking mostly about Clark Bug there, who is very closely involved in their North American channel operations and interactions with dealers. So hopefully that stability will remain after the acquisition closes. And then the other thing that I think is on people's mind, or at least a question that's on folks' mind, is what's going to happen with the Lexmark name after the acquisition. And I think probably a good indicator of that is if you look back a few years to when Konica Minolta acquired Muratech. That Muratech brand continued for a few years after the acquisition before it was phased out. And I wouldn't be surprised if something similar happens with the Lexmark brand. But no matter what happens, I think Xerox and by extension Lexmark are going to be worth watching very closely in 2025. Another company that we have on our watch list that we'll be watching, and that's for a couple of reasons, is Epson America. Now, Epson in our annual dealer survey had been gaining some traction among dealers as an A3 and A4 and printer provider. And the past year, we saw their numbers slip a bit. So is that a trend or is that just a bump in the road? We'll be curious to see when our 2025 survey comes out later this year. And then the other big reason to watch Epson, and that's their parent company's acquisition of Fiery. It will be interesting to see what's going on there, mainly because, well, there are a lot of things going on over at Fiery and EFI, and company was private equity owned, and this is the kind of thing private equity companies do. They're out there to make money for their investors, so it made sense in that respect to sell off Fiery, and how will that work under the Epson leadership? I think Fiery is not going anywhere. It's such a strong brand. So many products out there in the field are using those devices, and whether or not that opens some opportunities for competitors remains to be seen. But I think Fiery and Epson will turn out to be a pretty good match in the long haul. And again, back to Epson America, I am still very curious as to see how their performance will be in our annual dealer survey if dealers are still intent on taking on the brand and growing with it. Another company that we're going to be watching in 2025, and this probably shouldn't come as much of a shock, is Sharp. They always seem to be doing something right, at least based on the results of our annual dealer survey, where they get high marks from dealers. And I'm seeing that whenever I talk to a Sharp dealer for our annual dealer profiles or monthly dealer profiles, and very positive comments from those folks, and especially about how Sharp handled that supply chain crisis. Sharp's also doing a nice job of building out their A4 line in a move that I think dealers really appreciate. And it was a line that really could use some strengthening. And it's still way too early to tell how they're going to do on the production print front. But I think that's satisfying the needs of plenty of Sharp dealers who were itching to get into the production print space. And I think we're going to see some of the results of that in 2025. And one more comment about Sharp, and I'm going to go back a few years, actually more than a few years, to when Ed McLaughlin was leading the company. And I remember him talking at one of the dealer meetings about Sharp moving into that upper echelon of manufacturers where it's kind of Canon, Ricoh, and Konica Minolta. And it may have taken a few years, but I think Sharp is poised to move into that group and maybe displace one of those three. We will see. So we're not going to be just watching the OEMs in 2025. We're going to be watching dealers as well. And of course, there's plenty of mega dealers out there to watch. You name them, whether it's Visual Edge, Flex Technology Group, Ubio, Marco, and how about Dex Imaging? I think that's a company, now that Staples has sold it to Gamut Capital Management, there's going to be some interesting activity going on over at Dex in 2025. From what I understand, based on a conversation I had last year with Dan Doyle Jr., Staples kind of had their hands tied, or Dex's hands tied, as far as making more acquisitions. I think we're going to see some serious acquisitions happening over at Dex in 2025. And the other interesting development, which makes the company worth watching, is it's going to get into managed IT. And this is an area that it's shied away from in the past, but I think the writing is on the wall, and this is a great opportunity. And how can you not bet against Dex Imaging when it comes to moving into a new segment? And I think that's reason enough to watch Dex Imaging in 2025. And let's round out my list of 5 companies to watch in 2025. And again, there's plenty more companies we are watching in 2025. And as I always say in our introduction to the watch list, we're actually watching everybody. But here's a company, it's a total wild card, and hopefully you won't be all that surprised and you won't snicker too much when I say that one of the companies we're going to be watching is MPS Monitor. Now, the interesting thing about MPS Monitor that goes back to 2023 in our annual dealer survey when we asked dealers to name their top print management provider, they ranked number 3. Now, ACDI/Papercut captures that award by a wide margin every year. It was surprising to see MPS Monitor get into that small group of providers below ACDI and Papercut. An interesting thing happened in 2024. MPS Monitor did not make the top 3 or 4 print management providers, according to the dealers participating in our survey. Actually, hardly any dealer selected this company. I think maybe 1 or 2 out of over 400, which was a huge surprise. So that's a reason we're going to be watching them in 2025. They are still around. I think they're going to be very aggressive in marketing in this year and trying to build more name recognition in the dealer channel. And this has nothing to do, by the way, with them winning the award for best MPS software in the MPSA awards that were announced back in the fall. And I know there are some folks out there who kind of, shrug off those awards, and rightly or wrongly so. I'm not going to make any judgments on that right now. I do think it'll be interesting to see what's going to happen with MPS Monitor in 2025. I'll be at the Executive Connection Summit next week, which will be the week that this episode airs. And MPS Monitor is one of the sponsors, and I'm sure they're going to have the ear of a lot of dealers while they're in Arizona. So keep an eye on MPS Monitor in 2025. And that brings us to the end of another episode of Fridays with Frank, but without Frank. And he will be back in a couple of weeks. And I'm going to make sure we get his take on the Xerox Lexmark situation. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. And we'll see you soon.